Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over the Bitcoin miners, and we're also going to go over AMC and GME. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so we'll go over the charts, and then we'll talk about a few things afterwards. So we have Mara here. Just so you all know, I can show you guys right now in the portfolio, we do actually still have Mara and CLSK. We are getting absolutely killed on CLSK, unfortunately. It's really down a lot. It's down more than 50% where we bought it at. Unfortunately, we could buy more right now, of course, but we think we're just simply going to hold it right now. And when it rips back up, we'll just simply get out. Because again, we're kind of getting, in my opinion, we're getting closer to the parabolic phase of the bull run, and that's usually when these things start taking off. But of course, we also have the flip side of the argument, which is the bear argument, the underversion of the yield curve, the SOM rule, the Fed cutting rates, which in my opinion, the Fed cutting rates is bullish, but we'll get into that later. So we'll start with Mara here. So you can see that the price is closer towards the bottom, the bullish side of the Bollinger Bands. Usually when we get pretty close to the low of that, you can see we already tested it here. It usually indicates there is a bottom right around the corner, and we're usually going to rip at that point. Pretty much almost every single time you guys can see it got pretty close to touching the band, and then boom, popped off like a rocket. We haven't seen that quite yet, but that's an early indication potentially of a massive move to the upside. The other thing I want to point out here is that every single time Mara was oversold, you can see on the daily, you can see it here. It was oversold here. What did it do? It went up in price. We have another one right here, October 2023. What did it do? It went up in price. Granted, it took a little while. I mean, it wasn't immediate. It took like a few months in the October instance, and this instance here, it went up roughly about for 6 to 7 months, somewhere in there. So we have another one here in April. It went up for, I guess it basically topped out roughly about 3 months later. So if we were to see anything this time around, here in August 2024, after this crazy flash crash, something similar to what we've seen the previous times, theoretically, it should take roughly about 3 or 4 months for this thing to move back to the upside. Again, keep in mind that lines up perfectly with the timing of the Bitcoin bull run. So Bitcoin's not actually really supposed to hit all-time highs until right around November, December of this year. The end of the halving year usually is when it happens. Bitcoin always starts its bull run, and crypto always starts its bull run towards right around the time of the elections too, which funny enough, this year is an election. Okay, November 2020 when Bitcoin broke all-time highs, that was the election in 2022. And then again in 2016, and so on and so on. So I'm going to go to the weekly time frame now on Mara. We'll take a look at that. So you can see on the weekly time frame, it's even more oversold on the Bollinger Bands here. So you can see every time we got close or at the low of the Bollinger Bands, we did end up going up in pretty short order here. It wasn't always the case, but a lot of times that is kind of what happens. So you can see we have also tested the bottom of this thing here. Do keep in mind this is weekly time frames, so it takes a little bit more time for the weekly Bollinger Band or the price to react to the bottom of the band and then get back up to the top. The thing I'll say here is that the MACD is still in the bull zone, so that's always good. We unfortunately have gotten outside of this kind of rising broadening wedge, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to go back into it. I mean, again, you guys got to understand, oftentimes the markets will either undercut or overcut moves. What do I mean by this exactly? I can show you guys an example of this right here, let's say. Okay. So you kind of see these candle bottoms here, right? You see this one in June 2022 and this one here in March 2023. Most people would have bought here in July thinking this was the bottom, but then they just get undercut here in December. So basically this pretty much is like what this right here in trading terms would be something like a stop loss hunt. Okay, so if there was a long here and they had their stop right here, let's say just right below these candle lows, well, this stop loss hunt just took out their lows. or took out their stop, and then the market ended up moving up after that happened. Okay, so we could be seeing something very, very similar here. It's very hard to see. You almost can't even see it, but you can see that candle, the green one below the Bollinger Band here, did actually go below this wick. Again, that could be considered to be an undercut before eventually reversing and going to the upside. So in terms of support, I mean, it's hard to say exactly where this support could be. It could be at the bottom of the bands, which again is roughly about $15. I'll just give you guys the zones. So 720 to roughly about 1050. This zone is no longer support as of right now. This is resistance. So you're looking at about 18 and a quarter to 20, and then above and beyond that, 29 to roughly about 33. I don't think 33 is the top. I think that Mara is probably going to likely go a lot higher because, again, in my opinion, the $74,000 Bitcoin price we saw in March was the pricing in of the ETFs, at least in the immediate short term. I don't think that was the actual Bitcoin bull run price action. I think that's still yet to come. And what I mean by this basically is if Bitcoin goes past 74,000, which I strongly believe it will, then Mara theoretically should also go past its previous high here at $34. So I'll just measure this from the band and then from the zone. So you got roughly about 36%, 121%, and then all the way up at the wick up there, 130%. So if you manage to scoop some up down here at these lows, which again, I don't think that's going to happen, roughly about 158%, 320%, and 337% respectively. Do keep in mind you can sell options on these, but they are the miners are very volatile. So maybe a 20 delta might be best. It's a relatively conservative bet. Again, that's not financial advice. You guys can do what you want to, but I'm just letting you know. So CLSK, same thing as Mara. We got the oversold. Okay. This is the third time we've seen it basically in the last 12 months here. Every single time it got oversold, what did it do? It went higher. So we got one there, went higher, got one here, and then we got outside of the band, and then now we're back within it. So I suspect, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I suspect in the coming weeks and months, we are going to see CLSK go back up. So I'm not going to go over to the weekly time frame. And again, the Japan carry trade kind of screwed with everybody in terms of supports and all the other stuff that's going on in the markets. That was kind of a mini black swan event that I think nobody really saw coming. We didn't even know something like that was going to happen. So CLSK, once again, it's outside of the Bollinger Bands, as you guys can see here, which tells me it's extremely oversold. Okay, this thing is due for a bounce. So I'm going to say, I know this is going to sound crazy, but so you have your lows down here at roughly about $10, okay? So there is that, but I'm actually going to say that the support is going to be $12.30 to $14. Again, the reason being is because it's outside of the bands. Usually when that happens, which it's never actually happened, as you guys can see. I don't think there's ever been a time that that's happened. Okay, it happened once here. You guys can see way back here in 18, and what did it do? It absolutely skyrocketed after that. It's extremely rare for the price to get outside the bands. As you guys can see, usually when it does, it very quickly reverses to the opposite direction. So you got your support there, and then, of course, trying to think of what this is. Oh, right, the bull flags. So target for that's 36.49, resistance 2080 to about 24, and then above and beyond that you have 36 to roughly about 42.40. So if I'm measuring this, 70%, 92%, 190%, and then roughly about 240% respectively. I suppose you could actually pick up CLSK right now while it's below the Bollinger Bands. That would be a steal in my opinion. Again, we can go back in history and look at this. As far back as the eye can see, you can see based on a bird's eye view, it's only ever gone under the bull side of the Bollinger Bands once ever in this chart's history. So that indicates just how ungodly cheap this thing is right now. But again, there's opposite sides to the trade here. There is the risky side, potential an inversion of the yield curve, so on and so on. We already talked about that. Plus, there's also the upcoming Bitcoin bull run and the presidential election, and so on. So you got to weigh your risks and decide what's worth it, what's not. So Riot, we're pretty much sitting right perfectly at the bottom of support here. I didn't think we were going to get back here, but we did. So 770 to about 10 and a quarter, 1860 to $21 all the way up there at the swing high. So just doing the measured move here, I mean, you could make up to 171%. Again, this is kind of a very large support zone here. Below that, we're looking at roughly about, 340 to 537. And again, you guys can see that the price is slightly outside of the band here. So another very strong indication this thing is massively oversold and due for some upside. Riot is not completely oversold on the RSI on the daily, but it's pretty close. I mean, you guys can see we got a close callback here in January 24. And what did it do? It nearly doubled in price. Okay, so now we're going on to HUD 8. So we're not quite oversold on HUD 8, but you guys can see that we did. Here's a good example of this in real time. So we did test outside of the bands. What did we do? We immediately shot back up. Okay. So that's what I'm expecting to happen with the other Bitcoin miners that have experienced that. So this one's a little bit different. This one is within roughly about the middle of the Bollinger Band. So it could likely retest this support. Again, this top trend line is converging with the support zone there, so keep that in mind. The only thing I don't like here is the MACD death cross, so I suppose if you're worried about it, you could throw on some puts to catch the price on the downside, if that's even an option on this. I don't know if there's enough liquidity in the options market for this one, but that's an option, or you could just wait for the price to drop and then scoop it up, or put a limit order at a certain price. Like if you see you want your price to be, let's say, down here at $7, you could say, okay, I'm going to put a limit order at $7. If it fills, great, I'll buy it there. If it doesn't, then I'll just leave my order there. If it never gets filled, I'll cancel it. So support 365 to 875, 750 to 2250 at resistance. I would say these three are much more undervalued, in my opinion, than HUD 8 at this time. HUD 8 is kind of in no man's land right now, so it could still drop another 64%. But again, I don't think that happens. So probably somewhere around this trend line would be the bottom, which again, coincidentally lines up with the bottom of these candles. So from that point, you'd be looking at roughly about a 234% gain. Cypher, let's go down to the daily time frame. I'm actually going to look at the last three here on the daily time frame, see if we got any early signals. So we did get outside of the bull side of the band here. You guys can see that basically as far back as you can look, that's never happened. Quick reversal, whether it goes back up, basically shoots up in the coming days, or continues to trend down. We'll just have to wait and see. Getting pretty close to oversold. Usually every time that happens, it does at least go up somewhat. BTBT, we did get outside the band massively here, came back, basically rebounded immediately out of it. Nothing on the RSI and the MACD. And BITF, we did get oversold signal here for early August. Again, that was the flash crash, got massively outside of the bull side of the band, and then bounced immediately back up. Okay, so we're going to go here to, let's see, Cypher on the weekly time frame. All right, so what we're looking at here, and I wish I could say this was still support, but unfortunately it's not. I thought this huge breakout was going to be it, and that was going to be support from then on, but clearly I was mistaken. So support as of right now is still going to be roughly about that $2 level to 260, 270. Resistance 525.60, and then of course you have your wick high up there, which is a new target, roughly about $8. So you'd be looking at about 128 to 228% move. Now I suppose you could pick it up right at the current price, because you can see kind of all those candle bodies down there holding a support. That's up to you though. That'd be about a 53% to 120% move on Cypher. So this one's kind of middle of the road. I'd be looking at for it to either get to support to get in, or get to resistance to get out, one of the two. BTPT, same thing, middle of the road. Nothing going on with the Bollinger Bands. So support here 161 to $2, resistance 420 to roughly about 490. Then you have that swing high up there at 530. So there's a bit of risk to the downside here, 44%. I'm not sure it necessarily goes that low, but again, I wouldn't be really looking to buy this thing outside of support unless I was doing options. That's just me personally, because you can always do a cash secured put at a lower price than the current market price. So 170% and 193% respectively. BITF, this did get pretty close to the bottom of the band. The most important thing I want to point out here is we are still respecting this trend line. So the trend line would be like your ultimate low buy zone here. Again, that lines up nicely with the bottom of the bull side of the band. So roughly about 155 to, if we go out to December, about $1.74. Of course, I think that these miners will probably head up before December. I can't say for certain, but I suspect that's probably what's going to happen. So $2 to $2.40 as of right now for support, $3 to $3.60 at resistance, and then roughly about $3.90 all the way up there at the swing high. So you're looking at roughly 35, 62 and 79% respectively. Okay, let's go over GME and AMC. All right, so we got a death cross on the MACD, death cross on the RSI. The thing I want to point out here is, I don't know if you guys can see this, but we did actually get above this massive multi-year long-term downtrend, okay? When that happens, or I should say the last time that happened, we saw a huge, and I do mean huge, breakout. I mean, this thing was absolutely ridiculous. The other thing I want to point out here is notice the time frame in which it broke out, okay? So we got this breakout in September of 2020. This was almost exactly 4 years ago, okay? This was also during the year of the Bitcoin halving. It was also during the year of the presidential election. So what I think is going to happen is we may have to wait a little while. Okay, may have to wait for the crypto bull run to start kicking off and stuff like that. But I suspect probably no later than December of this year, we're going to see GME and AMC pop off to the moon. That's just what I suspect. I mean, everything's lining up perfectly for it. I don't see any reason why it couldn't happen. We don't have this coiling move on the bands as of right now, but excuse me, if it takes another 3 or 4 months for this thing to really start popping off, the bands could easily squeeze and then we get our big move after that. So we got the golden cross on the MACD on GME, okay? The thing I want to point out here is, we already talked about the timing, but the thing I want to point out here is you guys can see that it's actually a little difficult to see here, but you guys can see that we kind of got like a golden cross fake out, right? That was, in my opinion, before the time that it was actually supposed to happen, but then we got a golden cross here in 2019. And roughly about a year later, what happened? This thing took off. So the timing on this is lagging a little bit, but I do think this time around the kickoff for the bull run is going to happen much faster. Again, this golden cross took place in May of this year. If it starts popping off in November, let's say, right around the time Bitcoin starts popping off, which again, the Fed should be cutting rates by then. We should be going to new all-time highs. Money flows out of money markets back into risk on assets like crypto and stocks. Stock market goes up, crypto goes up. If all that aligns perfectly, and of course Trump gets elected because he's pro-crypto, then theoretically this should be popping off right around November to December of this year. So AMC, very similar thing, although AMC is kind of lagging behind a little bit with compared to GME, that's to be expected. So the thing I want to point out here, we had the golden cross in August of 2020, 3 months before the previous presidential election. So the price did not immediately go up, okay, but it started going up basically during the inauguration of Biden, okay? So pretty much right at the end of this year, we should see something similar, just like last time, maybe even slightly into Q1 of next year is kind of what I suspect. And again, we had this MACD golden cross in May of 2024. So You guys look back here at the MACD Golden Cross. We had it in, looks like roughly about August of 2020. So roughly about 3 months before the move. In this case, maybe it, May 2024, it happens about 6 months before the move. We get the Golden Cross here. And then in November, December, sometime this year, we get the massive breakout to the upside. And when I say massive, I'm not talking like this thing goes to $20, $40, $50. It could go to like 100, 200, maybe 300. Again, we don't really know if GME and AMC will be doing stock buybacks or any new contracts they might have or anything that may go on with that. So the last thing I want to point out here is that, give me just a second. So we have some gaps in the immediate short term. Okay, so we have this, of course, falling wedge. We got out of the wedge, and you guys can see we're coiling very, very tightly on the daily. Okay, very tightly. Actually, if I go back here, let's see if I can actually find a time in previous history where this happened. I'd probably have to go back pretty far here. Yeah, so you guys can see how tight these bands get, right? They get very tight and then they squeeze and then they get very tight again and then they squeeze some more. So the bands it's looking like they're tighter than they've ever been throughout history right now. So there could actually be a huge move on the horizon any day now. Yeah, so there's that. I didn't even notice that until I just looked at this. But the other thing is falling wedge. Target, again, is the top of the wedge. That's roughly about top of resistance here, $14. And then we also have the gaps right above there. So it's a little difficult to see, but they are there if you look closely. Actually, let me get rid of these so you guys can actually see it. So again, roughly about 1650 to 1950, 3650 to 43 gaps. I'd say like 97, 98% of the time they usually get filled. So that tells me that AMC likely still has to go back up at least to these levels. And again, when the big bull run takes place closer towards the end of the year, which I suspect is going to happen, that's when we should see these theoretically start hitting prices above this. Anything could happen in between now and then. So the last thing I want to talk about with you guys, just so you all know, we do actually still have AMC. So you can see AMC right here. We still have it, 910 shares. So last thing I want to talk about here is that I do suspect that the indices and possibly even the crypto market is going to actually start its next leg up. Well, stocks will probably start its next leg up in between now and September. I do suspect that's what's going to happen. The other thing too is that what am I trying to say here? So the other thing too is I suspect that the crypto market will also start ripping or doing its markup phase before the actual bull run towards the end of the year starting next month. Okay. I'm going to show you guys why. So we just had this big crazy panic sell-off. Okay. Markets were oversold. Usually the markets go up for a long time after this. Okay. They don't go up for a short amount of time. They go up for a while. So we went from April to July before we topped out. Okay, that's a 3-month time period. Last time here on the SPX, and again, you could probably look at you could look at the SPX and the NASDAQ to see this. But in November, we got that same signal, oversold on the RSI and the daily. We went up for nearly 5 months. I could go back even further here. So we got one down here during the bear market lows. Whoops, that's actually a little off. So let me actually really nail this thing. So we had some bullish divergence there, but you guys can see more or less it did go up. We could say from September to December, so roughly about 2 months, but it actually went up even longer than that till about February. So I think you guys get the point here. So NASDAQ, very similar thing. So April to July, and then we had October to March, and then we just recently had oversold here. So I am expecting the markets to actually be bullish for the rest of this month and also going into next month. Now, I'm going to show you guys why I think this is going to happen somewhat in tandem with traditional markets, but separately, as the crypto market is kind of somewhat its own thing. So the reason why I think we're going to start seeing the markup phase for crypto next month, if I go back here to last year, again, Crypto bull run usually takes place the presidential year, right around the time of the elections. That's usually what happens. The halving is also on the same year of the elections, if you can imagine that. But it's usually the elections that kick off the big bull run in crypto. So the thing I want to point out here is, so we started seeing a little bit of a markup in May, June, July, kind of a pullback in August, September, but right as September is about to end. Okay, right as it's about to end. Going in October, what do we get? A big, huge move to the upside. So if I'm not sure if this is even going to show for the 2016 one. It may be a little bit different. We'll have to wait and see here. But you guys can see that the crypto bull run actually did start taking off. Let's see if I can find it here. So 2016, you can see the market phase started beginning here roughly about the same time frame, August, September, October of the election year in 2016, which was also the year of the halving, and then the bull run began right around the time of the election. So what's going on here with Bitcoin as of right now? Well, pretty much the exact same thing that I've been showing you guys. So kind of just consolidation, accumulation. We never really got to close below the bottom of this flag. So if this is actually to turn out to be a bull flag and accumulation, what that means is that we should be going up to 125,000 as the target for Bitcoin. Could it be higher? Absolutely. The other thing I want to point out, and we showed you guys this on X, we haven't really had an alt season. Okay. So usually when alt season happens, Bitcoin tops out again right around the time of the election. That's what this means. It goes up. That's Bitcoin topping out, or Bitcoin dominance going up. And then afterwards, massive alt season. Okay, we have not seen a breakdown of Bitcoin dominance basically since the bear market lows. So anyways, this is the miners, GME and AMC, and also talking about the markets coming up in the coming months. So hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.